Good morning, grade 11s. Welcome to 4.4, Reading and Interpreting Statements. This is the final lesson of chapter 4, which means you do have a test tomorrow, and it also means that you should be completing the chapter 4 review that has also been posted on D2L. Today is also the last lesson I will be teaching as my time here is coming to an end tomorrow. So I just want to take the time to say thank you for engaging with the Minds On activities, with the videos, and for doing the quizzes and the test. And for those who have been able to come to the Zoom sessions, thank you. It was really nice to meet you all, and I wish you all the best in the future. So, like I already mentioned, today we'll be talking about reading and interpreting statements. So we've already done some of this stuff in 4.2, where we looked at transaction registers and we calculated balances and we looked at what sort of transactions were missing and whatnot. Same idea today, except now we're going to compile everything together where we're reading transaction statements or transaction registers, as well as credit card statements. So the warm-up activity you should have completed independently on your own as per usual. So we're going to jump down to the bottom of the first page where it says double check calculations. So people may read numbers or operations incorrectly, and this causes calculation errors. So it's a very good idea to verify important calculations. And this idea is very important when we're talking about transaction registers. If you make a mistake when you're calculating the balance right at the beginning, that mistake is going to carry throughout the whole transaction register. So it's super, super, super important. You're being very cautious of the numbers that you're putting into your calculator and the operations that you're using when you are making these calculations. Just to clarify, operations include addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Let's take a look at question number 1, where it says, find the error in each statement, then write a correct statement. The first one is done for us. Okay, so it says 43 minus 7 is equal to 50. That's incorrect. The error is the subtraction sign. That should be a plus sign. 43 plus 7 gives us 50. Let's take a look at B. 143 plus 16 equals 160. So if we were actually to carry out this addition, 143 plus 16 is actually equal to 159. So one of those numbers is off by 1. You can either change the 143 to 144, or you can change the 16 to 17. I'm going to say the error is with the 16, where this 6 right here should be a 7. So it should be 143 plus 17, and that is equal to 160. C says 188 plus 20 is equal to 108. So again, if we actually carry out these calculations, 188 plus 20 is actually equal to 208. So where I see the error is in the final answer. Whoever wrote the answer down might have accidentally put a 1 instead of a 2 in the hundreds place for the final answer. So the correct answer is 188 plus 20 is equal to 208. So that should have been a 2. And lastly, for 1D, it says 88 plus 9 is equal to 79. Again, a similar error to question A. The operation is incorrect. 88 minus 9 gives you 79. So that plus sign should have been a minus sign. Okay, an incomplete transaction register or one with calculation errors does not help someone keep track of their account. And that makes sense. If you are making miscalculations, that means your transaction register is not going to be accurate. And if it's not accurate, it won't really be helpful to you to know how much money is in your bank account. So we're going to do a little bit more practice with filling in transaction registers. Here we have Charlotte's for the first part of August. So we can see she starts with a balance of $1,414.80, and then she makes all of these transactions. Question A says, calculate the balance after each transaction in the register. The first one is done for us. Okay, great. So we start with that balance of $1,414.80. On August 3rd, she makes a payment to the daycare of $135 using a check. So we subtract 135 from our balance, and the new balance, which is already written for us, is $1,279.80. Great. The next transaction made is some sort of payment to Rachel, and a check was used for this because there is a check number written. So Charlotte made a check payment to Rachel for $45. So that's going to be removed from her account. So we subtract 45 from our balance, and we get $1,234.80. The next transaction is groceries, and she paid $116.20 for her groceries. So that's going to be removed from her account. So we have to subtract $116.20 from our balance to get a new balance of $1,118.60. So you can put all of these values into your calculator to double check that my answers are correct. Okay, now on August 10th, right over here, pay was deposited into her account, which means she got paid. So because money is being put into her account, the $834.05 is in the deposit column because money is being added into her account, which means we're going to add this amount of $834.05 to her previous balance to get a new balance of $1,952.65. Then on August 12th, she had to pay for a gift for her mom. So that cost her $75.50. So that's going to be removed from her account because she spent that amount of money. So we're going to subtract $75.50 from our previous balance to get a new balance of $1,877.15. The next transaction was done on August 16th, and she took out some cash. So she took out $100 in cash, which means she's now removed $100 from her bank account. So we have to subtract $100 from her previous balance to get a new balance of $1,777.15. And her final transaction was a check payment to her daycare for $135. So because that's being removed from the account, we have to take away $135 from her previous balance to give us a final balance of $1,642.15. So the answer for A is $1,642.15. Okay, question B says, after Charlotte withdraws $100 on August 16th, the ATM receipt shows a balance of $1,642.15. It looks like one entry is missing. What and when might that one be? Explain your reasoning. Okay, so let's take a look. So on August 16th, right here, she withdrew $100. So this is the balance that we have on our record on August 16th. However, the ATM receipt is showing a balance of $1,642.15. Okay, so the balances that we have on these two different records are different. So let's see what the discrepancy is. Let's see how much our balance is off. So we're going to take $1,777.15, which was the August 16th balance that she had on her transaction register. And we're going to subtract it with the balance that the ATM receipt shows, which was $1,642.15. So this was the August 16th balance on the ATM receipt. So if you do that subtraction, you get $135. So somewhere in this transaction record, she forgot to put down that she took out $135. Now, if we take a look at our transaction records, notice that the 135 keeps appearing as a number to pay for the daycare. So perhaps she had to pay for daycare somewhere between, August 3rd and August 17th, but she might have just forgotten to write it down in her transaction record. To further this case, if we look at the check numbers, notice how it jumps from 218 to 220. So it looks like she wrote another check. She wrote check 219 for $135, probably for daycare. She just forgot to record it into her transaction register. So that's why her balance on her transaction register is more than what's on the balance from the ATM receipt, because she forgot to record that she withdrew or made a payment of $135 for the daycare. So check number 219 is missing from the transaction register. And this check was probably written on August 10th. And the reason for that is the first one was written on August 3rd. The second one was written on August 17th. Those are exactly 2 weeks apart from each other. So if there is a missing payment that happens to be between August 3rd and August 17th, it's probably right smack in the middle of those 2 dates, which means she's probably making weekly payments to the daycare of $135. So we're going to go ahead and say that this check was probably written on August 10th. So see how missing one payment or forgetting to record one payment can affect the overall balance of your transaction register. This is why it's super important to be very mindful of your purchases and to write them down immediately. So question C wants us now to complete the corrected transaction record. So everything up until the pay deposited on August 10th, so everything up until here is the exact same. So I just went ahead and already rewrote that stuff because there's no need to rewrite it if it's the same. However, after the pay that was deposited on August 10th, that's where we have to insert new transaction. So on August 10th, Charlotte also made a payment for daycare. And that's what was missing in our previous record. And she used the check for this. She used check number 219. So we found the error and we were able to make amendments and fix the transaction record accordingly. So we know that the daycare costs $135. So now we're going to have to subtract $135 from our balance of $1,952.65. And that new balance we get is $1,817.65. So this row is what's been added in. This is what was missing before. Okay, so all the other transactions that follow are the same, but because of this new insertion here, our balances are going to be different. So we have to do a little bit of math. So on August 12th, remember she made a debit to pay for a gift for her mom. And that cost her $75.50. So we're going to subtract $75.50 from our previous balance to get a new balance of $1,742.15. The next transaction was on August 16th, and she took out some cash, and she took out $100 in cash. So we're going to subtract $100 from our previous balance to get a new balance of $1,642.15. And the last transaction she made was a check to the daycare So check number 220, and this was made on August 17th to the daycare for $135. So we're going to subtract $135 from our previous balance to get a new balance of $1,507.15. So at the end of August 17th, Charlotte has $1,507.15 in her bank account. Okay, moving on. It says, often you can tell a lot about a person's financial situation by examining their records. So whether it's their transaction registers or their credit card statements, you can determine a lot about an individual's financial situation by looking at those statements. So we're going to use Charlotte's record to answer these questions here. So 3A says, what was the lowest balance that Charlotte had in this account during the first half of August? Remember that this statement is, or this transaction record is just for the first half of August. So we're going to look at the balance column and we're going to see which is the smallest number. If you look through, you'll see that $1,118.60 was the lowest balance she had at one point in time for the first half of August. So that was the lowest balance she had. $1,118.60. Question B says, if she's paid bi-weekly, so remember that's every 2 weeks or every 14 days, how many days after the last transaction will she be paid? Okay, so first we need to figure out when she was paid. So the last pay she got was on August 10th. So she got paid on August 10th, which means her next paycheck, which is exactly 2 weeks from August 10th, would be August 24th. So you can just look at a calendar and find August 10th and then count 14 days from there to get you to August 24th. So if we know that she's going to receive her paycheck on August 24th, and we want to figure out how many days after the last transaction she will be paid, well, we need to see when the last transaction was. So the last transaction was August 17th, okay? So we need to figure out how many days have passed between August 17th to August 24th. And that is exactly 7 days. So 7 days will pass between the last transaction and her next paycheck. Question C says, what debits to Charlotte's account will likely happen between August 17th and her next pay? So even though there's still a week left before she gets paid, she's most likely going to have to pay for some stuff. Remember, we figured out that she pays for daycare weekly. So August 3rd, then August 10th, August 17th, and 1 week after August 17th is in fact August 24th. So between August 17th, her last transaction, and August 24th, the day she gets paid, she is going to have to make a transaction to pay for daycare. So daycare is something she will have to pay for. And she's most likely going to have to buy some groceries. The last time she bought groceries was August 5th. We're about 2 weeks past August 5th. She's probably running out and going to need to buy some more. So daycare and groceries are some of the expenses she will likely have to pay for between August 17th, which was her last transaction, and August 24th, which is her next day of pay. Okay, so now let's take a look at her credit card statement. So if we look here, her previous balance from her last statement was $232.90. I should also mention that this statement is for all of the purchases made between June 25th to July 27th. She paid only $100 of her last statement, so she has an overdue balance, and because she didn't pay her balance on time, she has been charged interest for $4.72. And then on top of all of that, she made new purchases, which amounted to $343.74. So her new balance for this statement from June 25th to July 27th is $481.36. And this amount is due on August 19th. So question A says, on what date was the June statement likely due? So if we go to the due date for this current statement, it's August 19th. Typically, your statements are usually due on the same date, meaning the same number. So every month, her statement is probably due on the 19th. So if her June statement, and another thing I should mention is you usually have a month to pay for your statement. So if I get my January statement, that's usually going to be due in February. My February statement is usually due in March, and so on and so forth. So her June statement is most likely due in July, a month after, and it's probably due on the 19th of July. So we're going to say her June statement was likely due on July 19th. B says, what items on the credit card statement were added together to determine the new balance? So remember, our new balance was $481.36. We need to add up all of the charges and overdue balances that she had from her previous statement. So we need to add up the overdue balance, the interest charged, and the amount she has to pay back for all of the new purchases she made. And that will give us our new balance for this statement. So what items on the credit card were added together? Well, the overdue balance, the interest charged, and the new purchases. And you can definitely check for yourself. If you add those all up, those three numbers up, you would get $481.36. Okay, so how could Charlotte have avoided that interest charge? Remember in yesterday's lesson, we talked about paying your balance on time. And if you didn't pay it on time, you would be charged interest. Well, in order to avoid being charged interest, it's simple. Just pay your balance in full by the due date. And if you can't afford to pay it by the due date, you probably should be steering clear of using a credit card. So by paying her balance in full by the due date. Okay. So this is an important little caveat, something to remember here. Often, payments made through an ATM or using the internet need to be made 2 or 3 days before the due date in order to be processed by the due date. So if your Visa statement is due on July 19th, don't make the payment on July 19th because it won't be processed for another 2-3 days, which means the bank is going to think you paid your fees late. It'll come back 2-3 days later saying that you paid. So to avoid that, you need to pay it at least 2 to 3 days before the due date. Question 5A says, has Charlotte likely paid this month's credit card bill? I think it's fair to assume that she hasn't. For one, she didn't pay last month's bill on time. So we can kind of come to the conclusion that she's most likely not going to pay this month's bill on time. Another reason is if we look at her transaction register, nowhere in this record do we see that she made a payment to a Visa or a MasterCard or an American Express credit card company. So because there was no credit card payment recorded here, we can likely conclude that she hasn't paid her credit card yet. So 2 reasons. One, she didn't pay her balance in full last month. And B, there is no transaction paid to a credit card company. Recorded in her log. Okay, so 5B says, by what date should the payment be made through an ATM or the internet so that is not overdue? Remember, it takes about 2 to 3 days for the payment to process. So if her statement is due on August 19th, she needs to make the payment at least 3 days before in order for it to be processed by the 19th. So 3 days before August 19th is August 16th. If she really wants to push her luck and do it 2 days before, then she can make the payment on August 17th. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our lesson. Please complete the check your understanding independently and refer back to the answer key to check your answers. Please remember also to complete the chapter 4 review. And if you have any questions, I will be available on Zoom today. So please do come and bring whatever questions or concerns or clarifications that you might have. And lastly, don't forget to complete the 4.4 quiz and to study for your chapter 4 test tomorrow. Again, thank you so much for your time this past month. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best in the future. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully one day we'll reconnect and I might be your teacher. Take care.